Hi everyone. I want to talk about the dangers of the paleo diet. So the paleo diet is like a reincarnation in a certain way of the Atkins diet, which is a reincarnation of the Navy diet, which is a reincarnation of the Letter on Corpulence, which was a low carb book written in the 1800s, which went into several issues of publication because dieting without carbs or very low carbs works for, I would say, about 8 people out of 10. So the paleo diet is saying that we're going to eat the same way as our Paleolithic ancestors, which is the Stone Age, meaning that in the Stone Age we were not eating grains, which is correct. We were not eating beans, which is correct. And we were not eating sugar, absolutely. And the fruits that were available to the Paleolithic hunter-gatherers would have been wild fruits and berries, which are smaller and less sweet than our cultivated, domesticated ones. Okay, for example, a wild peach is like a thin, fleshy membrane around the pit, and it's like kind of bitter and not very sweet at all. If you've seen wild grapes are like this, whereas now in the supermarket you buy grapes that look like plums. They're huge, right? Cultivated strawberries are pretty big. They can be bigger than that. Where wild strawberries are like beep, right? So we see, even never mind Paleolithic, we see people of today that are hunter-gatherers don't eat a lot of carbs because it's really a diet based on protein and fat. Now, this has some merit because we do share a lot of DNA, the majority of our DNA, with our Paleolithic ancestors. But a danger of the Paleolithic diet is to consider that it's optimum, okay? Very few diets of any animal in the world is optimum. And the average cave person, some estimates put their death rate at about 28, some 30s. So for a cave person to live to my age, 49, would be rare. So why are they dying off? Because they didn't have soap. They didn't know about bacteria. Now, Paleolithic people did control fire and use fire, and they ate a lot of cooked meat, and a lot of their skeletons exhibited a lot of arthritis. Now, that's not because they lived in a cold place, because the Inuit lived in a cold place. Nobody lives in a colder place than the Inuit in terms of native peoples, right? And the Inuit had almost no arthritis, and they had unusually good health. What's the difference between an Inuit and the Paleo people is that the Inuit, yes, they had fat and protein, was the entire basis of their diet, but it was mostly raw. So even if they would cook some of their food, it was like a chunk that was briefly boiled and then eaten. So the inside was still raw. And so they had a lot of enzymes, okay? So if you're going to go on a paleo diet, one of the dangers is eating too much protein, especially cooked protein, putrefies in the colon, and meat is a proven carcinogen. Why? Because if it's not properly digested, it will putrefy in the colon, make toxins which are absorbed into the colon, into the whole body, and is definitely a link with colon cancer. I eat a lot of meat and poultry and eggs and fish, but I take enzymes every single meal because I'm eating cooked poultry, meat, fish, eggs. So the enzymes that I take are compensating for the fact that the food is cooked. Now, there's another problem with being a cave person is rampant food poisoning. Probably not as much as we would get from our commercially prepared meat, because commercially prepared meat is just, especially in the United States, let's say, is like on an assembly speed line. So you get a lot of E. coli, which is basically shit bacteria, all over meat. 3/4 of the ground beef in the United States has E. coli in it, and E. coli only comes from poo. So when they're gutting these cows, that process must be happening so fast that some of the poop is getting into the meat. Now, if you cook it really well, then you're going to kill the E. coli, so it's not a big deal. So Paleolithic times, even if you cook it, you're eating it with dirty hands because you don't have soap and you don't even know what bacteria are. So paleo is not always ideal, and that early death rate from the average of the skeletons that are found is an indicator that the diet's not ideal. I do propose a high protein diet for people that are lifting a lot of weight and they thrive on it, but with the caveat that they have to have enzymes with animal proteins to prevent the auto-intoxication from putrefying, partially digested, indigested meat protein. Okay, we're not lions, so we don't have the digestive power of a lion. And besides, a lion is eating all their food raw. Early zoos, like in the late 1800s, had a very high death rate of their big cats and of their apes and chimps and things like that, until they figured out, oh, we should give them most of their food raw, and then they were thriving and even reproducing, not thriving as well as they would in the wild. I'm kind of against zoos, but it was figured out that, and you know, if you look at our domestic cats and dogs, they get all kinds of health problems that wild dog family like wolves and coyotes and all that don't get. And wild cats and wild big cats don't get these problems either, like diabetes, overweight, cataracts. So that's one of the problems with paleo diet. The other problem is I'm a type A blood, and besides being type A, which in theory should do well on grains, I practically also know that I do well on grains. I eat lots of grains and I do great. So I'm on a high fat, high carb, high protein diet. For me to eliminate grains would be worthless. It wouldn't help anything. But if grains don't agree with you, I suggest everyone try eating no grains, which is kind of a paleo idea, and see how you feel. If you don't feel an improvement from not eating grains, then go back to eating grains. Having said that, I don't think wheat is a good idea for anyone. So two dangers of the paleo diet: eliminating grains when you don't have to. It's not really a danger, but grains are delicious. So why would I eliminate my millet, my brown rice, my buckwheat, my quinoa? Why would I eliminate that if I don't have to? My rye bread, oh my God, I love rye bread. So not really a danger. You can live without grains, they're not a problem. Beans, also not in the paleo diet. I eat lots of beans, I digest them amazingly, but I soak them overnight, throw away the water, and then I cook them. That way you're getting rid of the anti-enzymes which are in beans. So beans have anti-enzymes. They don't want to be digested. But if you soak them overnight and they start germinating, then they actually metabolically develop enzymes and they dump their anti-enzymes into the water. So you throw away that water and you cook the beans in new water. So three dangers: eliminating grains and beans, which are a pretty cheap way to feed yourself, right? So if you're eliminating grains out of your diet and you're eating nothing but meat, poultry, and eggs all day and some greens, you're going to spend a lot of money needlessly. But it is worth it if you don't tolerate grains. And the best way to find out, do you or do you not tolerate grains and beans, is to spend a few days without eating grains and spend a few days without eating beans and see how you feel. Okay? So some things to keep in mind if you want to try this paleo prescription is that. Otherwise, I would say that I have met people that do very well eliminating grains. And some of these people have been my clients because I'm like, yo, you have IBS, you should try eliminating grains and see if it helps you. And it always does. So people with IBS, IBD, they generally do a lot better without grains. But even if they keep eating grains, if they would just take a really good enzyme every meal to compensate for the fact that they're eating their food cooked, which has no enzymes, that alone would help IBS and IBD. All right, so a couple of things to keep in mind for paleo prescription.